decisions made for you. Almost all of you probably have some sort of healthcare directive or power in place. Raise your hand if you don't.
Do not.
Okay. So let me start with the California law. California law allows each of us to make any decision for our medical care that we want. This includes the right to die, the right to refuse treatment, the right to take ourselves out of the hospital. It allows us to make or to appoint someone who can make those decisions for us. But if we have nothing in place, no delegation, then California law says if you become unable to make a decision, first is your spouse. He or she can make a right to live decision, meaning allowing the use of life support, consenting to surgeries. A spouse does not have the right to make a right to die decision. So if you're in the hospital and you're on life support equipment, your spouse doesn't have the ability to say turn it off unless you have some sort of delegation. Let's get stopped. Want to get some chairs?
Yeah, we got a few people that are just getting here, so yeah. There's a couple spots up front there, guys.
Come on in.
Find a spot. There's a.
If you don't have a spouse, the person who has the right to make a decision for you on medical care, on right to live, is your children. Now the problem comes up, what if your children don't agree on what to do? That's a big problem. If no children, grandchildren. But beyond that, no one can make a decision for you regarding your health care unless you've got something in writing. So the first thing I think it's important for each of us is to consider for ourselves what components go into medical decisions. The most obvious one is describing or consenting to medical procedures, surgeries, any kind of medical care that's necessary. The second type of medical decision that may have to be made is if you need to be placed in a care facility and you don't have the mental ability to make that decision. And the third is the end of life decisions. You're on life support equipment and the question becomes, what should we do for the patient, our loved one, and what does it she wants? Now in all of these scenarios, I'm assuming you do not have the ability to make an informed consent. You might have be unconscious. You might have significant dementia. There may be some reason that you yourself cannot make the informed consent. If you can, of course, you make your own. But I'm talking about situations where you don't have that ability. So along with the idea that you can make your own decisions, I think it's very important that you start to consider what it is you would want at end of life. Maybe you're in a terminal illness. Maybe you have had an accident or a stroke or something and now you're unconscious. What factors do you want to be included by your family in determining whether to remove life support or to continue it? That takes into account the physical. What do the doctors say is going to be happening with you from a physical standpoint? It takes into account mental. How will my mental status be? Yeah, if I'm not going to be good, don't get me. What about emotional? What if you may not be able to feel emotions and feel love and give love to family members? And then fourth, what's my spiritual impact into that decision? Catholics, of course, want the last rites. I may have it wrong, but they want last rites. And so there's usually a chaplain on the hospital, and Catholics, for the most part, do not want to have life support removed until they have their last rites. Again, I may not have that right, but something along those lines. But many religions have different feelings that way. So you have to take into account the spiritual aspects of it. And what those spiritual aspects are of the decision are very personal. Very personal. So I wanted to next talk about the different types of documents that are available. And what I'm seeing is several of you I've worked with have a power of attorney for healthcare. And next thing you know, the doctor says, here's a post. And then you go to Kaiser, who's your medical care provider, they give you an advanced care directive. There's these layers, and so at some point, what it is you really wanted may have gotten buried in what's going on. So let's talk about the different ways, different types of documents. The first is a living will, also known as a DNR, and you'll probably find that as the first, it starts on page 2, these numbers got cut off. So a living will essentially is DNR, do not resuscitate. No matter how I present at the hospital, don't resuscitate. Is that a good idea? Many people will say, sure, I don't want to be resuscitated. I want to make a distinction between a maybe terminal illness versus a car accident and the trauma has caused an unconscious state and you may be okay. Do you really mean DNR? Maybe you do. But when you read this document and it says do not resuscitate, that's what's going to happen. How many of you have a pink dot on your driver's license? So, interestingly, several years ago I had a car accident. It was one of those accidents when my car donuted around the freeway and I got hit by several cars. And so, the car makes it to the side and the ambulance picks me up. And the only ability I had in my brain was two things. Please don't cut my beautiful new camisole I had on. And second, I heard one of the EMTs say, where's her ID? Does she have a pink dot? And I thought, why is that the first thing you're looking for? I was in
What about the cami?
It was brand new and it was cut. So anyway, not only that, but there were the other guy in the car was in the same ambulance. And I'm thinking, please don't cut my cami and leave me exposed when he's over there. Anyway, in the ER room, Bill remembers this. He came in and the doctors are all circling around and I've heard more than one say, is there a pink dot on her license? So I finally had enough presence of mind to say, hey, I'm a lawyer, make sure you do this right. Whoa! They were all there, every single imaginable specialty.
So that's what we need to say.
So my point of that is, the pink dot means that you want to donate organs. That may be exactly how you feel. I feel that way. But the pink dot might just keep the ER folks from doing everything they possibly could. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, and I certainly would not say a doctor is going to do it wrong. But if that pink dot's there, it might interfere with how your family is making your medical decisions for you. Have a pink dot if you want, but just remember, there's other ways to accomplish your goal of donating organs. All right, so living will, that's the DNR, do not resuscitate. That's all you got, don't resuscitate.
That's the only question that they ask you when you call?
Well, you won't be able to answer because you'll come in from a car accident or something, but if they see in your wallet or if they see someone who has a DNR, they're going to say, okay, we can't do anything. So I'm suggesting a DNR is probably not the preferred way to handle your medical decisions. The second is an advanced care directive. How many of you belong to Kaiser or Sutter and they give out these pre-printed forms? Okay. So if you'll turn to page, I guess the page I just got cut off, darn it. The Advanced Healthcare Directive allows you to designate or delegate your decisions for making medical decisions to anybody. Anybody you want, as long as they're age 18. So you can make decisions about health care, going to a doctor appointment, and if you have to be moved into a care facility, where to go. When it comes to the end of life decision, if you can find, let's see, 1, 2, quite find it. Okay, it's on about the 3rd page of the Advanced Care Directive. Here's what all of these pre-printed forms say relative to end of life. I direct that my healthcare providers withhold or withdraw treatment in accordance with one of these choices I've checked. So it says, choice 1 or choice 2, choice to prolong life. I want my life to be prolonged as long as possible within the limits of generally accepted healthcare standards. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I believe that, I don't know about you, but the older I get, the younger the doctors get, with more therapies, more technologies, and all these things they can try. You have to think to yourself, do I want the accepted limits of healthcare to be used here, and then doctors trying everything that's possible? That's one way. The second is, I don't want my life to be prolonged, meaning turn off the life support equipment if I have an incurable and irreversible condition that will result in my death within a relatively short time. Or turn off life support equipment if I become unconscious and to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, I will not regain consciousness. Third, turn off life support equipment if the likely risks and burdens of treatment would outweigh the expected benefits. So, in that second part about the reasonable degree of medical certainty not going to regain consciousness, I'm not sure about you, but I'm not the one making that decision. Who is making the decision about reasonable degree of medical certainty? The doctors, right? I don't know any doctor.
Health insurance, whoever pays for it, right? If we can afford it, we'll try it, huh?
Well, again, you have to look at your own decisions, but a doctor, if this is what you have, and you are a patient and you're unconscious, the doctors have to be consulted. The doctors have to find that there's no reasonable degree of medical certainty you're going to regain consciousness before your spouse or your agent can pull the plug. Some of you may feel comfortable that way.
Who has more power when this question is asked, your children or your spouse? Or
Well, your spouse first.
Family members?
Spouse first, or your children, unless you've designated somebody in writing, somebody else. So the other concern here is that the third option is the one that says the likely risks and burdens of care. I think there's a very important aspect of medical decisions that we have to each think for ourselves individually, and that is the quality of life. You may become not unconscious. You may regain consciousness. There may be other physical or mental ailments, but you're alive and you go home. This is where quality of life decisions are included. I myself, I was telling my husband, I don't really want to come out of an unconscious state if my quality of life is such that I cannot pick up my grandchildren and love them, right, or enjoy them. That's just my vision. So I think it's really important that you each decide for yourself, what is your quality of life? What is it you would want to continue to live? What would you say, no, just isn't for me? Doctors cannot consider quality of life. That's too subjective. Doctors are going to consider, therapies and technologies they can do and what the numbers say. So quality of life is a very important aspect. And under an advanced care directive, then, you're the patient, you have your spouse or your child, and you have the doctor, all involved in this decision. Doctor has to make certain findings before the life support equipment can be terminated. You want to ask yourself, are the doctor's decisions one you want to rely on, and then your spouse could, or agent, can remove life support? Or do you want your agent to be able to consider the quality of life issues? So let's go to the third document, and that is the next one. It's on legal paper. It's called Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare. This is my own power. I removed names to protect the guilty. In this power, I designate an agent. I've designated my husband to make medical decisions for me if I'm physically or mentally unable to make them. That's the same thing that an advanced care directive does. But if you go to page, looks like 15, and it starts, you'll see roughly line 4 there, statement of desires and special provisions. This is where I'm saying my agent, Bill, is directed to talk to the medical providers, the doctors, the nurses, the neurologists, the oncologists, the, what do you call them, hospice, the palliative care, talk to my children, talk to our pastor, take into account all of the information that's there. The doctors will give some decisions, or not decisions, but recommendations about prognosis and what they think my life would be like if I come out of the unconscious state. Bill's directed to take that information, talk to all the children and sons-in-law and daughter-in-law, well, she's Catholic, but sons-in-law, and consider what I would want based on the totality of the circumstances. I find for me, this becomes much more applicable to how my decision should be made. You can look at how I've written mine here, and it allows, it's a little more open-ended on purpose, because quality of life becomes really important. Any questions so far?
The word diminished, very distinctive in here. I'm wondering, it says, or if I do regain consciousness, the quality of my life would be diminished.
The question that Keith is asking, the word in here is if the quality of my life would be diminished. That's a very broad term. Some people want to have it say greatly diminished.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to make sure of in my power is I don't want anybody who sits in the white tower of the hospital's legal
Right.
ethical team
Right.
to say, well, her life isn't greatly diminished. It may be diminished, but not greatly. I didn't use greatly.
Right.
I did it just diminished,
Right.
because I trust my husband and my family to make the decision.
Sure.
So these are just ideas.
Right. Okay.
Some, you can say substantially
Oh, yeah.
diminished. You can say if I can't do A, B, C, and D.
Right.
So,
Okay.
it's very subjective, and that allows you to sort of build how you see it happening. Okay?
We've also talked to Bill, so he knows what you mean.
Well, on that note, I'll come to this in just a moment, but I might as well talk about who should be your agent. Could be your spouse, could be your children, could be your best friend. My husband is mine, although I just had a conversation this morning on the end of life. I'm sort of thinking about naming my sons-in-law. Well, I mean, he says he could make a decision to end my life.
You need to find someone that can actually.
Well, my oldest daughter is a little,
Not so emotional.
my second daughter is way emotional. My son, love him, he could do it, but he's married to a woman who, I love her, but she's Catholic. Okay, and I that does play into the decision. So I said to my two sons-in-law, you're up. Interestingly, they are the only two of the entire family who have said to me, well, tell me what you want. So, we think intuitively our spouses will know. I'm not so sure that's accurate. I'm not, please, not, honey, love you. But when it comes to your agent, you want to be certain that that person knows what you would want, can interpret what you would want based on the circumstances. Pastor, you had a question?
Yeah, on comment? You recently did something like this with our older daughter, right? And she designated her younger sister, who is the one in the family who has, or is going to have the most medical knowledge and can make rational decisions. They also talk a lot to each other, and chances are her younger sister will be alive longer than her parents. So it's.
Well, so in here, I also have alternates. I have 3 different people listed as a, so my Bill for mostly, and then sons-in-law, but on the end of life, but I have my daughters for any other decision. So you, again, you can add as many as you want to, so we're not in that position. The other thing that's very important on any healthcare is under California, if you pass away, if you don't have anything listed, your spouse is the one that has the right to make a right to decide on disposition of your remains. If you don't have a spouse, your children have to agree unanimously. Not a good idea when, in many cases, when your kids have different feelings about cremation versus burial versus anything else. The other day, a client said she wanted to be composted.
Oh my.
That's a new thing.
So donate the organs and then go get composted? And
Get I didn't ask, I was so back to this document. The reason I use this for myself is it allows a lot more flexibility for my family members to make decisions that would be based on my decisions. The words I've used here are my own. You can modify them by using substantially or whatever is comfortable for you. So,
Robert,
Yes,
do you have your desires written down, you can them in writing to your agents?
the question is, do I have my desires written down? The answer is no for two reasons. First, I might change them, change my desires. And I rely on my husband and my children or sons-in-law, keep them updated. The other reason I don't have it written down is, can you imagine a time where you're in the hospital and the rest of your family's just beside themselves? And so your agent says, oh, wait a minute, I've got here what mom wants. Now it's written down. All of a sudden the doctors take that and that might inhibit your agent's ability to make certain decisions.
Hmm.
So, it's not a Thanksgiving dinner conversation, but we do have it. Yes, Diane?
Each time I've gone in for a heart procedure, I've had to have an advance directive. The hospital hands me one to fill out if I didn't bring mine with me. And in fact, after Barry died, I had forgotten that I needed to replace him I put Breaker down. And they had the people standing in line behind me checking in, being one of the witnesses. You evidently, when you're going in for certain surgeries, you have to have one.
Well, actually, they give it to you and you say, I have my own.
Well, but I had to bring it with me, and in my case, I
Every
had to
every
change it.
hospital's different, but
Yeah.
can you hold that question, because it's gonna come back to something that's very important. Let me go through the last document, Diane, then we'll get back to that. The last is this pulsed. Looks like this. It's typically on neon blue, yellow, orange, green. This was a response by the California legislature about 10, 12 years ago. Oregon had an assisted suicide law, but California does not. So California's response to that was this POLST, P-O-L-S-T. It means Physician's Orders on Life-Sustaining Treatment. And the goal of it ostensibly was for patients who are terminally ill, their doctor could talk with them and sort of write down what their decisions would be at that last moment. Okay, in theory, that concept is good. However, I don't know how many of you have been to the doctor, but the doctors hand these things out like crazy, no matter your status. So they're having you sign documents regarding end-of-life issues. The concept was, if you have a terminal illness, you probably are much closer to understanding what you would want in that situation. But if you're not in a terminal illness, the statute itself says you probably don't have that good of an idea. So these things, every time I turn around, they're being given to people and people are signing them because your doctor says, oh, you should have this. I'm not a fan of this because if you look and read it closely, the decisions you have to make and the boxes you check may be contrary to what your real desires are, and they would really inhibit the freedom of your family to make certain decisions. So again, I'm not saying anything's good, I'm not saying anything's bad. I wanted to bring up what my concerns are with some of these things. How many of you have been given a POLST? Yep. How many of you live at Eschaton, and when you move in, they say you have to have a POLST? That is, until I called them and said, oh, no, you don't. And so they backed off on that. What they really were trying to say, as it turns out, that they wanted of all their residents to have some sort of document that allows someone to make medical decisions. But the POLST severely restricts what your agent can do for you. So it's a real
God
problem.
said to build a life that you would prevent matters like this from happening until, long until natural things pass away and things like that. Like when Noah was seen naked by his sons and stuff. But
I
his
agree.
life was built together. He had his marriage, his
I know, but
children.
the problem, so that's then, this is under legal documents. So this is what I'm trying to get to, is the legal documents that allow us to carry out our own decisions based on personal convictions.
Well, not everybody have the resources to get their hands on these documents, but
I just gave them to you.
What if it's
I just gave them to you.
mentally planned out and you just want to be a good Christian about it, and you request these things from the doctor, but you don't like medicine, or maybe you're not comfortable with.
Let me say this, one of the reasons I gave you written documents is you can use these documents yourself. You don't need to go to the doctor. If any of these seem to fit what you personally would want, you can use them. Bruce, you had a question.
I did, I know people that change their minds a lot, And in fact, my dad did many times, like, I don't want anything I do. And whenever he said something like that, it was complied with. There's no paperwork or anything.
That's because he's
So-
orally telling you, right?
Yeah.
And
But I
you-
was never known if I was an agent or anybody else. So again, different state too, but,
So, well, let me come back to just a minute, because I want to
Okay.
talk about that. So I've just given you an idea of the different types of documents you'll see, whether your lawyer give it to you, whether the doctor, whether just generally you go on the internet. Keith,
How much document confusion potential is there here? If you've got 2 or 3 different documents conflicting.
therein lies my next point. It's a hornet's nest of confusion.
Come on.
So, you have a healthcare power, and next thing you know, you went to the hospital for surgery. They pushed that advanced care directive at you. Okay, great, but it specifically says, this revokes anything I've done before. Boom. So all of a sudden, what you've done before is gone. Now this advanced care directive comes into place. Okay, and then the next time you go to the hospital, same thing.
Or false, whatever.
And then the neighbor over the back fence says, oh, the best thing since sliced bread, I don't wanna be on life support equipment, I use a DNR. And you don't stop to think that a DNR may be exactly what you want in that last minute of life, but it's probably not what you want in the car accident. So as you execute new documents, almost always they supersede the ones you've had before. So, and then the last is that pulse, the one that's on the neon, that supersedes everything. So,
So does
Now
that
you
affect like the history that's being built? So if you've done something before and then you have like an emergency crisis accident, then that doesn't comply with what you're going through.
so the issue we have is if you are needing, or your agent is needing to make a decision, the most recent document is what's going to control. That's the agent, that's the decision-making process, and so it's a complete, like I said, hornet's nest. And every time, those of you who work with me, you know, every time you come in, I say, okay, did the doctor give you a pulse? Did the doctor, have you been to have surgery? Because I know they revoked what you did before, and I think that this is the area where very careful planning and very careful thought and thoughtfulness as to how you want to see the end is important, and if you now revoke it with a new document. So, I can tell you, go into surgery, you can tell the intake people, no, I have a healthcare power. You do not have to sign a new one. Second, you go to Eschaton and say, call Robin Bevier, she'll tell you why you don't have to. Ernie?
Can't you have, these documents put into your medical record, so when you go into the hospital, they are there,
Put into what order?
into your medical record?
Yes, and you should. So if you have a healthcare power, you should have your doctor, have it at your chart. Go to Kaiser. The first couple times my clients took things to Kaiser, they're saying, well, we can't use this isn't our form. And then I call the healthcare patient relations, say, yes, you can. So now, they just put it in the chart, so.
So what I hear you say is put all your energy into creating a carefully thought through durable power of attorney, and then practice the word no.
That would be a good summary. Again, some of you want to use, where doctors are more involved in the end of life decision. That's okay. I just want you to read the documents and determine what works best for you. Because, my family, last person I want making a decision that's subjective, meaning quality of life, are the doctors. They're all great at what they do, but they don't know anything about me or my life.
So at what age would you consider putting these documents in place? Especially considering if one document can cancel out the next document, the laws change and stuff
So
like
I think
that.
it's very important that you look at whatever documents you have now, compare them to what you think you may wanna have, use a new document. I would put a copy of it in the glove box of your car. I would, shrink it, some of you who are tech savvy know how to do this, shrink it and stick it in your wallet or your purse. I've been I'm on a committee that's lobbying the DMV for blue dots, and the blue dots mean, look in my wallet for a healthcare directive. We haven't gotten there yet. But,
Good idea.
Kathy,
We have a 98-year-old friend at Escatan, and she asked me the other day, she has a DNR, but she said, what happens if, and it's at home, and what happens if she's up at the clubhouse and something happens, and the ambulance comes, and she does not wanna be resuscitated, but they don't know that, because she doesn't have it on her.
Well, a couple things. Remember, if you call the EMTs to come, they are going to take whatever steps to resuscitate you.
Even if you don't want that.
Well, this is what's crazy. So you have a pulse, for example, or you have a DNR. EMTs, if you call them to the house, they're going to revive you or resuscitate you, take you to the hospital.
But if she's not at the house,
Well,
That's
then I would
easy.
suggest her friends know where to look for it.
okay.
Okay, that's the best I can say. The other thing, until we can get through with that blue dot on the license, I think it's never a bad idea, on your license, take a little yellow sticky and put, see my healthcare directive or power of attorney for healthcare. That will alert the ER personnel to take a look at something. Okay, so the first, yeah, pass,
No, that's great, good idea.
one more
Okay,
question.
I really enjoy help, and I'm only 30 years old. I just turned 30. I'm going through a midlife crisis, so I really wanted to come to this group, and I'm thankful. What type of situations would put you in a situation to need a pulse?
So these are designed for terminally ill patients,
So that's a chronic thing that you kind of live.
chronic, and it's toward the end of it.
So late stage cancer.
Okay, my grandmother has chronic pain, so I was thinking
No,
something like.
chronic pain is not it, more
No.
like a late stage cancer, sometimes late stage dementia, which is very hard to determine, so. Let me go on to the next pieces here.
Do you know how to go about getting, like a list of what you ought to be checked out for as you approach this age, so that you don't miss anything?
I am just a lawyer, I am just a lawyer. No, I can't
Do you
even get
guys
myself
just go
checked
to like a
out.
bunch of different hospitals and just kind of check it out, or is there like this list where you're just like, this,
I
this, this,
don't
this,
have any list, I don't know, so.
So you
Okay.
asked about the age. Robin has an
Yes,
answer
ma'am.
for that. From what age?
Let me go on to the next pieces.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to do is show you all the various documents that are out there. Any of them can work for you. Depends on your personal viewpoint, depends on to what degree you want doctors consulted, to what degree you want family making decisions. I would urge you to pull out your own documents you have at home and take a look and see if what it says versus what any of these say, see what might work better for you. There absolutely is no right or wrong, it's your own personal decision. So let me move to the second phase of this, and I'm gonna go backwards. Who should have a power of attorney for healthcare? Anybody who's age 18 or over, because once you're 18, your parents have no access, so Bill knows this, when our oldest daughter went down to Cal Poly, I'll get her first or second year, anyway, I tried to call her 3 days in a row, and she didn't pick up her phone, which was kind of unusual. I reached her roommate, and she said Stephanie was at the clinic or the hospital, and was unconscious from a medication, something. So I called down to the clinic and said, can I check on Stephanie Bevier? And they said, who are you? Oh, well, I'm her mother. Well, she's 18, she's 19, we can't talk to you. I never thought about a healthcare power of attorney. So if she'd had one, I could have faxed it down there, then they would have talked to me. As it turned out, I had to drive down there. Of course, I couldn't drive down there, but I would have known that she was okay. So anyone is age 18 and over, a lot of our clients have kids going off to college, and before they go, we make sure they have these in place. A lot of times younger people don't want to have powers of attorney because they think mom or dad are going to butt into their affairs. These are very specifically set up for a situation now. It means if your mom can look at your medical records as it relates to your particular situation. They can't look at medical records from before. It took me quite a while before I could convince my daughters. And interestingly, my son is the only one that read his thing the whole way through, so it was kind of interesting. They're very specific to the moment. So anyone age 18 or over. What else should you do with your powers? You should review them periodically to make sure you've got the right agent named. We have several scenarios where there's been a divorce, forgot to change healthcare powers, and the embittered ex-wife is still the agent. And
What if your husband has 2 wives?
I will leave that for the court of bigamy, and that's gonna be a problem. So I think you would wanna check at your agent. Is the person you've named as your primary agent, or even your secondary, is that person still in your life? Are you still married to him or her? What about the agent not having as much capability? Should you name or change your agent so it's someone who has the emotional and mental ability to make decisions for you? Should it be, I always think you should have an alternate, because your primary agent, of course, something may happen, have an alternate. Do you have the right people in place? When it comes to end of life and spiritual decisions, if it's one of your children, do they believe like you do? So will they know what kind of input is necessary? When it comes to disposition of remains, I had one family last week, the last parent passed away, 3 kids are in the office, they're all fighting over the remains. One wants to bury, one wants to cremate, one wants to do, I don't know what, send it to space or something. And I was like, wait a minute, and the parents had not made a power of attorney for health care or designated the person to make those decisions. So California law left it with the kids having to unanimously agree, not even 2/3, unanimous.
How did that end?
Huh?
How did that end?
She's still propped up in a corner.
Well, how did it end? I chickened out and said, look, you each need your own lawyers to work it out, because it's not, you know.
Wow.
I mean, it's unfortunate. And funeral homes are very cognizant of these rules. So check your agent, make sure he or she is still capable, make sure your alternates are there, make sure these people are still in your lives, make sure they follow your thought about end of life decisions and all the aspects that go into that.
So if you have like a public type of health insurance, does that still qualify you to fill these documents out, or do you need a private insurance?
No, you can have, no, whatever you have, that's not related to it. You can fill these out, every person can fill this out for themselves. Ernie?
So, the law that protects your medical records is called HIPAA.
Mm-hmm.
Does that law contained in each of these documents? Or
So the question is HIPAA and its application, and whether or not your agent under a power of attorney of some sort can get medical records. The answer is yes. Okay. Unless you prohibit it specifically, but then what would be the point, right? The other thing I think is important as we age. I've done this, or I'm doing this in my healthcare power.
You age well or you get old?
No,
I don't want to get old.
well, I don't either, but it's all gonna happen. So as I'm getting older, any of us, you know, we may be in the hospital for any number of reasons. I, in my power, specifically give my children the ability to access medical information. Can you imagine if one of your kids lives a far ways away and they need to check on you, and they call the hospital and they say, I'm checking on my mom, and they say, we can't talk to you.
So how do you do that? Where do you?
In the power,
Okay.
in a power, you can give access. You name the people who have access to medical decisions. So mine allows my 3 children to do that.
I didn't realize that, and when I did it, I put them all on as agents, you know, the first one in order, because they said otherwise they can't get information, and like you were mentioning, my son lives in Florida, he is going to be calling, not.
Yep.
You know.
So the last thing you want your child to go through is calling from Florida and has no idea how mom's doing. So all the kids have access, the decision-making falls in order, my husband, and then it's gonna go through the children or sons-in-law, as the case may be. So, remember this, that healthcare powers, I'm sorry, Debbie, go
So
ahead.
I was just gonna say, perhaps it's important, because I'm dealing now with my 96-year-old mom, and she has no cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
We need to do all this folks, as we can do it. Once you get to a point, Robin, could you address the fact
Yeah,
that
so,
you can't change this later if our mental capabilities aren't there?
So the question is, and Debbie, that's exactly right. I'm a proponent of getting your power of attorney, whatever it's gonna look like, in place. You can modify it as many times as you want, but it's very important to put on your power a little sticky note with big red writing. This is it. And remembering, you go to the hospital, the doctor's giving you something, always pull out the document you did before you sign something else. But what happens if you have nothing in place? Okay, I said earlier that a spouse can make right to live decisions for you, consent to surgeries and procedures, or then children. No one can make a right to die decision. I think Debbie's question is going more to, as we might become unable to make our decisions medically, and we have nothing in place, then what? So in California, it's called a conservatorship of the person. Any of you familiar with that? Okay. A conservatorship of the person is where the courts actually appoint someone to be your legal representative for all personal decisions, meaning healthcare, placement, etc. The issue with a conservatorship is the judge says in open court, a public setting, I find that Nancy is incapacitated, and we're naming
before.
and we're naming so-and-so as her conservator. Well, I don't know about you, but that's a very, feeling. But that's how a conservatorship works, and then the person that's named to take care of Nancy is able to make all sorts of medical decisions, not end of life, but anything else relative to your care, etc. Now, under a conservatorship of the person, there are a couple things that even the conservator cannot agree to without a court order, and that is, if you have dementia and you're a wanderer, so you really need to be placed in memory care, which is known as a locked perimeter facility. A conservator of the person cannot agree to that. You have to go get a court order to that effect. So now we're back in court, with lawyers, and now we're back in court with all this public communication. So I think with one of these, you can use it for taking care of and placing people in places. Did that answer your question, Debbie?
Oh, yeah, I'm just, if you don't have this in place, even as loving children or whatever, you're not gonna have an opportunity to make these decisions. That'll be made for you, and you might have some input.
Nothing's worse in this world than having somebody make a decision for you, right? Ken?
A little different topic, but can you speak to California law regarding assisting death?
So assisted death, so I started earlier by saying Oregon has an assisted suicide. The pulse was our response to that. So you still cannot assist actually, but if a doctor will give certain kinds of medication, I don't know what they are, and if they are, if the patient wants it, I have clients who have put their spouse's hand on the whatever it was.
Yeah.
So we don't yet have a law specifically that says you can formally assist. And that's what I'm gonna say with that. Formally assist.
Well, if you can assist with the suicide,
Sounds like.
what is the difference between a suicide and a death?
I'm gonna not go to that question because California is very clear about what you can and can't do.
Okay.
But I'm the kind of, don't quote me, I prefer to ask for forgiveness and permission. And I have had several cases where one of the spouses was in agony and wanted to die, and a spouse cannot really administer all the whatever. So, I mean, it was heartbreaking. No one was even my family, so we all have to make our own decisions relative to that. That's all I'm gonna say.
What would the Lord say about
No,
you
can't-
having made all of the
I'm not gonna
proper
address that. I'm only talking.
documentation, put it in order, and then boom, your kid just said, I want her cremated, I want her.
Well,
this
that's why
and
the
that,"
documents are
like-
necessary. Dave?
Yeah, but what if they can't find the documents? If you got all these different things that put it in quality, the mental, the physical.
Then what you do is you make sure that whoever's you want making decisions know where your documents are.
And that kind of goes
Can't
with
remember.
my question. You were talking about your children. Eric lives in Burlington, Vermont. He can't call to the hospital to find out how I'm doing, or he can, but they aren't gonna tell him. Even if I've designated him, unless they have the document to know that he can get the information.
The question is, if you're allowing your children to call in and get information, how's the hospital gonna know that?
Yeah.
So you make sure you put this with your doctor, your chart, you know, wherever. That's the first way. And second, send a copy to each of your children.
So he can fax it to him and
Yep.
say, Robin said.
You'd be surprised, that's getting some traction these days. Debbie?
Oh, I think that's a really important point you just
Yeah.
made. Your agents need to have these materials.
Please.
Your agent should have.
So healthcare powers, or whatever you're using, in my opinion, are the one document you absolutely should share with your agent, with your family. And I think it's critical that you have conversations, again, not Thanksgiving table conversation, but sometime else where you talk about the things that you do and don't want, so you can start to give your agents a sense of the decision that they should make. And for those of you who have been in the room at the time, it's extremely difficult and it's hard to remember. So the more you discuss with your family your desires, the more you're empowering them to be able to make the decision. So if I had to take a look at this, I'd say first, think for yourself, what are your end of life decisions and on what basis should those decisions be made? Second, which of the documents here best suit what you would want to do? 3, get them in place and share them with your family so they all know where they are, what they're looking at. And 4th, don't willy-nilly sign something the hospital puts in front of you or the doctor hands out. Diane?
And 5th, anytime you go to the hospital, grab your document and take it with you. When Gary went in for his appendectomy, they had it put in, because we brought it, they had put it in the system at Sutter, so when he died, it was already in there.
So if you're with Sutter, with Kaiser, with UC Davis, they have internal, what do you call those, patient,
Portals, ways to.
whatever, patient medical records, there we go. You can have them scan in, and when you go to surgery, they'll already have it. There's a question, Ernie?
Debbie especially has had a couple of instances where her parents go to the doctor and they have a doctor in place. The doctor, because of their reduced mental capabilities, they signed another document without Debbie knowing. And so it superseded what they had.
You mean the patient signed another document?
Yes.
This is very typical. I tell you about these doctors handing out these posts. So a senior goes to the doctor. This is before anybody in the family realizes there might be some compromises. And the doctor says, here, I need you to sign this. They talk about it. Probably the senior forgot about it.
Right.
And that's a real concern. So my biggest suggestion here is you talk with your family, your children, or whomever is going to be involved as you age about what you have, okay? And then second, it's okay for you to give a statement to your doctor. I don't want to post, I don't want this, I have my healthcare power in place. Stick that in your chart. Because this is becoming, and honestly, doctors don't know the difference, they're just being told to pass these out.
And
It's hospital policy.
If you go to the doctor with your loved one, and the doctor shoves a document in there, puts a document in their hand,
Sorry.
you need to be proactive and help them understand that new document might not be necessary.
That is absolutely correct, and the medical providers, the hospitals, all that, they just know, it's coming down from their administrative side, so they don't even understand the differences.
Couldn't you put something in your directive that says, only if my mental capacity is diminished, only my agent can authorize a change to it?
So if your mental capacity is already diminished, there can't be a change. If you're not able to
But I
understand.
mean, if it's in there already, in your directive.
Yeah, but again, how many doctors do you know, unless they're gerontologists, specialize in this? So I mean, they're just being told to do this. So the way I would handle it as I get a little bit older is when Bill comes home to the doctor, I say, did they give you any documents?
Did you sign anything?
Well, and that's important because, we're at a doctor, I'm a lawyer for a reason. So, you don't want sometimes what you're signing. So, again, I think you wanna be comprehensive in your view of this. In my opinion, forget the trust, forget the wills, forget all that. This is more important than anything else because your end of life decisions rest in what you want and how you want them carried out. So, yeah.
I just wanna make clear, this document that you you gave us the durable power of attorney for healthcare.
Yeah.
Is this the specific one that we would actually use and take?
Something like that. I took that from my own. You can modify some of those
Oh,
provisions.
I can modify it
Yes, those are
myself.
just an example of what mine looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Mine piggybacks. So I like what you said about your own durable power of her attorney for healthcare. What if I were to take yours and take some aspects, leave others or so, and come up with my own document, have a notary sign this? Is this binding, or
Yep.
does it have to look like this?
Nope, I just gave you, I mean, best I could do is take mine, take names out.
Yeah.
And, these are ways to get you to think. And so, in
Uh-huh.
the end of life, especially in quality of life, but again, be very careful that the more you write, if I present at the hospital and I have X happening, then do this. You wanna be careful,
Yeah.
okay?
got it,
The
got
other
it.
thing I would recommend is the less in that document and the more in a separate, like, letter of instruction to your family
Uh-huh,
is probably better, because as you write more things in there,
makes sense.
it might create this position where the hospital
Yeah,
says,
uh-huh.
sorry, we can't use that.
So, does it have to be notarized?
They have to either be witnessed by two people or notarized. I am a fan of notarization because that creates a neutral party saying you signed it. I've seen too many situations where a kid gets a mom to sign something and then they notarize it or
The
witness it.
witness has to be two non-family members, right?
Two non-interested people, but again, it's too easy as you get older for a kid, the black sheep kid, to come in and say, Mom, sign this, and I'll get somebody to, that, I think notary's best. There was another question here.
Just to verify again, you don't need a specific form. You can actually write your entire one yourself.
As long as you have some, in the document I use, that's mine, there are some references there to California codes. You wanna include
Okay.
those, okay?
Thank you.
And you wanna make it complete enough that there's no openness to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so as we
What
walk,
would the Lord say about storing these documents? Like, are these like, like seriously? Because Jesus came of age at a very young
I know, but
age,
this
and
is,
he was anointed.
okay,
But
but listen,
when Mother
I'm
Mary
sorry.
tried to find
Listen
him,
to me.
like they didn't let her into the party, and all the documents are all like Bible stories, and it just makes me
So
think
these
of
documents you keep with you, or you put them in a safe place
You
until
said
some,
shrink wrap them, put them in the car, but then they can't be verified unless you know exactly where to pull them from,
you
or
make sure
somebody
that the,
brings
you
it
make
in
sure
with
that
you.
make sure that the person you've named to make your decisions knows where you have it, or you give that
Mm-hmm.
person a copy. Okay, any other questions? So I hope I haven't muddied the waters. I really wanted to express that there are all these different kinds of documents. There's no right, there's no wrong. I urge you to take a look at your current documents, check the agent, that person's still right. Don't have it be an ex-spouse from a divorce. Is the person you've named capable of making the decision? Annalee?
I would just say, within a hospital setting, you have two resources. The discharge planner and the clinical social worker are also well-versed in matters of end-of-life decisions.
And also remember that
And the chaplain.
most,
You
yes,
have
to say,
resources within the hospital.
every hospital has a chaplain. In fact, they almost all have two, more on the Catholic side, more on the Protestant side, and don't fail to ask for what you want. So please take a look at your current powers. They may be exactly what you want, but be careful if you think, remember, you maybe signed different ones. We've got these tiers. The most recent one is gonna control, and that may or may not be what you want.
So what if you're scared that the quality of like the documents that you chose are not up to par, that you would like to share them with anybody? You just want to give it to your doctor and you say, hey doctor, will you call them? Do you need to have like a private doctor to do that, or
No,
can you be
what you can
public?
put in there is the person that you're naming, and then put a phone number, so they know how to call the person to make a decision.
So if I have a wonderful durable power of attorney for healthcare in place, and my doctor talks me into signing a post form, can I simply go to my wonderful form, change the date on it, supersede the other one, and get it notarized again?
I would white it out, Xerox it, sign it, and re-notarize it.
Okay. good.
It's very, when you're in a when you're in a doctor's appointment, you're sitting in your little gown, and the doctor's in talking to you, and he says, well, we need one of these filled out, let me help you. I don't know about you, but that's kind of a Okay, so, just remember, my purpose today was to give you ideas and ways to look at these things. And when a doctor's talking to you at any given time about this, that may be exactly what you think is right at that moment. But then go home and kind of look at the totality of what you've got here. At the end of the day, you have to decide if the decision-making on end of life is more in the doctor's hands or more is based on the totality of the circumstances and your family members are making that decision. Sons-in-law included. Anyway.